Hello, John Tillery from First Colony Bible Chapel. Sir Robert Anderson, the Assistant Commissioner of Scotland Yard and head of the Jack the Ripper investigation, was a devout believer from the Open Brethren, and he wrote a book that went into great detail regarding Daniel's 70 weeks. Harold Honer, one of my professors at Dallas Seminary, wrote chronological aspects of the life of Christ. In it, he also details Daniel's 70 weeks. Now, those two books outline what turns out to be some amazing math, so much so that those who deny the math don't even accept Daniel as a historical figure from the time of the Babylonian exile who interpreted dreams and saw apocalyptic visions of the future. In fact, liberal scholarship judges that the book had a long process of development and was maybe assembled by 168 or 164 BC. Now, that dating process, of course, would render any prophetic look null. But then those scholars do not accept prophecy anyway, at least not foretelling prophecy. But for those of us who do believe that Daniel was a real person carried away into captivity, what can we discover? First, calendar dating, not as straightforward as it might seem. The primary reasons for that are we don't have a perfect calendar. Today we use a solar calendar called the Gregorian calendar. So every 4 Gregorian years, there's a February 29th. That is to keep us on track. However, in the ancient Near East, they had never heard of Gregory, and besides that, they used the moon. They had a lunar calendar. That ended up giving them 12 months of about 30 days each. But what about the time slippage that February 29th accounts for? Well, as it turns out, a lunar year is about 365 or 354 days and some change, and that's about 11 days shy of a solar calendar, so they would add an additional month. This leap month is based on the requirement that the Passover, which took place in the spring, always occurred in the spring. So traditionally for Babylon and Hebrew calendars, the years 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, 17, and 19 are long 13-month years. If you've ever wondered why Easter roams around the Christian map, there's part of your answer. Okay, so now we know we've got apples, Gregorian years, and oranges, lunar years. But what else do we need to know? John 19 and Luke 23 tells us that Jesus died on the eve of Passover. So that started about 6 p.m. on Friday. But there's something else that's important. John 19 tells us that the Passover was also a high day. What does that mean? It meant that Passover was not only Passover, it was also Sabbath. This means that Jesus died on the eve of Passover, Nisan 14, and on a Friday afternoon before the Sabbath, which started at 6 p.m. Why is that important? Because using any modern astronomy program, we can determine the exact dates when Passover and Sabbath were combined. Since Passover is always Nisan 15, Christ was crucified on the 14th. But what year? What Friday? Using a full moon, it turns out we have a few choices, AD 26, 33, or 36. Based on historical and gospel records, we know that Jesus was born approximately 2 or 1 BC. And Luke 3 tells us that Jesus started his ministry around the age of 30. We add about 30 years there, and what we have is that the most reasonable date for Jesus' death was Friday the 14th, Nisan, AD 33. So what does Daniel 9 say? 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Know and understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble. After 62 sevens, the anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end. Desolations have been decreed. You know, the text states that the time from the start date of the prophecy, the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, to the end date Messiah will be cut off, is 7 weeks and 62 weeks, or 69 weeks total. This is equal to 483 years. Genesis 7 and 8 lets us know that a biblical year is 360 days. So 483 biblical years by 360 is 173,880 days. When that's converted from the biblical calendar into the Gregorian calendar, what you do is you conclude that that's 476 Gregorian years plus some change. Professor Hoehner used 365.24 days to come up with a year. You'd have to know Prof. Hoehner to understand him using 12 digits after the 364. But regardless, the Gregorian calendar is closer to the solar calendar than Sir Robert Anderson used, so consequently his estimate is more accurate, right? By what, a couple of days? Anyway, they both understand that the start date begins with Artaxerxes' decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Nehemiah tells us that that decree occurred in the 20th year of the king's reign. In the chronological aspects of the life of Christ, Hoehner dates the decree Nisan 1, 444 BC. So from 444 BC, sometimes you may hear 445, that's when he came to power, when he ascended, but in Jewish practice, the ascension year is never counted as the first year. So Prof. Hoehner, using the Gregorian calendar, points out that 1 Nisan, 444 BC, is March the 5th. And the end date comes 10 Nisan, 33 AD, which is March the 30th. And that corresponds to the 10th of Nisan, which was Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, which occurred on Monday. So why would the day be the triumphal entry and not the crucifixion? Simply, far from being accepted on that day, Messiah was rejected. He was cut off from his people. It took a few days for the leaders to figure out how to kill him. So what are we to take from this? At the most fundamental level, since what God has said in the past about the future has proven true, then the remainder of what has been said is also true. God is true. He is true to his word. He is true to you. I hope that helps you understand Daniel's 70 weeks just a little bit more. I'm not going to talk about the book of Revelation today. We'll spend time in sermons on that. But this is just a little background information for you to use in your study or your research or your pondering about last week's message, and frankly for many of the message that we've already given and many that will yet come, dealing with God's prophetic plan for the world, especially for the Gentiles as he's brought the church in, and also for the Jews. Thank you.